In a previous film, we were looking at using natural light from a window. In fact, this is exactly the same location, but we're basically working from the opposite end where we kind of worked the first time. So in the first film that we created with working with the window light, we kind of looked at Rachel the model up at this end of the room. Now there's a difference because this end of the room was getting a specular light. What's specular? It means it's sharpened and it's more quantity and quality of the light. Whereas in this end of the room, so literally she's now where camera was and I'm where she was. Okay, so that's the kind of the flip that we've done here. But because the angle of the light coming through the window on the other end, there was more quantity of that light. This end she's shielded because the light direction, so in other words, the sun has moved around a little bit and it's basically pointed at an angle that is going towards the other window and the other wall. Whereas obviously here she's in the kind of the shaded part of the light. And this is where I'll often refer to as the kind of the dull light or the unspecular light, the unsharpened light. One of the problems that we have with it's not so much the quantity, because obviously we can just increase our ISO, slow our shutter speed down, or open our aperture a little bit more. And then technically we've got as much light as we would have had at the other end. But it's about the quality, the muddiness of the light or the sharpness of the light. So because she's now in the kind of the shaded light, as it were, even though she's right next to a window again, you can already see that the interior lighting is now beginning to show up a lot more than it was when we kind of saw the first kind of shoot. And the reason being in that is because obviously the light is less at this end of the room. So even though she's near the window, and all of the same things apply, in other words, as she turns her head away from the light, we'll basically start to actually get less kind of quality of light on the face. As she turns her face towards the light source, it'll become more flattened, light in the 5 planes of the face and so on with it. But at this point, it's about quality of light. So as a rule, I will always work with the more specular light. There are times, however, where the duller light, the muddier light, still has its kind of place, especially when we start to want this real flattened kind of light in with almost no contrast within the scene. The biggest problem that you'd have in working inside with window light, of course, is when you've got the room lights which are above and they're on. And I pretty much walk into a room and I switch on the lights no matter what to bring everything alive. But you can start to see how they start to kind of illuminate the walls themselves by having the archways and everything else here. So again, first things first, when we're working with window light, I'll encourage you to work as close as you can to the light source. If you need to illuminate more of the face, in other words, the 5 planes of the face are not quite being lit if she looks at camera position, perhaps as we look at her, face left would be too much in shadow perhaps, then you just need to turn her body towards the light source. Preferably though, you turn the head towards the light source. If you remember from film 1, we talked about it's better with a female body that we turn the body physically away from the light source a little bit, because that increases the 3 dimension to the body, creates shape and creates actually dynamic actually with bust and all the kind of shaping of the body that we create. Whereas when we turn the body flat into the window light, it tends to flatten things out. So we've kind of got a good quality of light onto Rachel's face there, but if we start to actually look down all the shadow areas, you can see in fact the main shadow of Rachel is not coming just to the left hand side, it's actually coming vertically down, so almost even from each side. This means that the room light, the spotlight from above, is almost giving us the same intensity of light than it is coming from the other window. Where would this be applied? So if you stood a bride in the window and we had drapes each side of the window, if the bride was in the middle of the window, no matter what kind of quality of light is coming in from outside, because you've got the drapes and the window aperture itself creating a negative light source. In other words, you've got a small aperture, like a small softbox where the light is coming through. You'll have you'll have a more dynamic light quality than you will actually if she's in the shade. So if she stood backwards more and she was just into the shade of the drapes, then you would be kind of working in the muddier part of the light. So there's this kind of edge of the light that we talk about. Often when you're working with a softbox, in fact, the subject isn't quite in the softbox light if you're working with a feather technique. That means you're working with the edge of the light coming off the softbox, which is the softest of all the light from a softbox. But when you kind of push them too far away from the edge of the feather of the light, then they basically become in this real muddy light source. And basically you start to actually waste the quality that you've tried to create by using the likes of a softbox and so on. Back to the window. So if she turns her head away from the window itself now, you can see already that more and more of the light onto the face is actually from above rather than from the window itself. If we kind of allow ourselves to come in closer, you start to disguise the problem because there's a little bit more bounce going on. And probably, if you want to kind of lift things a little bit more, a bit of a reflector below the camera position in this point and pointed back towards the subject and the window will start to add more and more of the quality of the light back in. You'll add some sharpness to the light, especially if you're using a metallic or a silver reflector as such. But as you also move in, you start to see more detail. Whereas when you're kind of further away, it's like you're almost squinting and you start to see the contrast on the image because it's more difficult to see the detail as such. So just don't kind of do your test shot on the close-up image. Look at the full-length image because that's really where you'll see the quality of the light and so on with it. We know by default from what we talked about on the last film that when we turn the face towards the light, we flatten out the light. Remember, in portrait photography, we're trying to kind of light the 5 planes of the face, the forehead, the chin, the 2 cheeks and the nose. And if we can achieve that, we're pretty much going to get a good quality of light coming onto them. However, by turning the face into the light, into the softbox or into the window, you flatten all the features because we're now kind of losing all the actual shadow. And we need some shadow by design as a rule because we want to actually thin and shape the face as we see them lit by the sun and so on with it. So to maximize the light coming through the window, even though it might be soft, we need to turn the face towards the light more. But what we need to do is possibly lean the head just that little bit so it still points a little bit more towards the light and the eyes are looking towards the camera position. Try and avoid from kind of turning the head to an almost profile position and then getting the subject to look at camera because that can put too much tension on the eye and it looks very, very weird. And basically when a subject, if she was in this position now and she was looking out of the window, she always needs to look just that little bit higher as well and straight in the direction of the nose. Otherwise, the eyes are going to look a little bit weird when you actually see them as such, really. When we start to lower the subject down, like on a seat or on the floor in a minute, the light quality is going to fall off rapidly. And that's because whereas we worked on the other end and we had the good angle of light, we had the good quantity of light, and we had the better quality of light, when we're working on this end and we're already working at a disadvantage because we're working in the muddier light, the angle of the light as well is not kind of helping us by kind of falling downwards. We start to actually at least create a little bit more muddiness to the overall scene, but the angle of the light is now changed, so it starts to illuminate the face. And from a distance now, we can see that the face is lit, not bad, specifically because she's looking out, but also the position of the light to the actual window itself. If we were to look into her eyes, we would see the catch light in a higher position in the eye than basically when she stood up. When she was stood up, the catch light would be coming from what would be the 3 o'clock position, or if we're lucky, closer to the 2 o'clock position. Here, the catch light is going to be coming in no lower than the 2 o'clock position, but more likely to be at the 1 o'clock position. So this is creating an angle of light, even though the light itself doesn't want to help us. So basically the same thing. Now we can see, if we step backwards and we kind of look at the overall scene, we can see the quality on the face, because the light is stronger because all the other light is being removed. So it's kind of controlling the aperture and the direction to the light. Whereas when we start to actually kind of come in close, we can see that we've got the quality that we need. So if you need to actually increase the quality of light, get them a little bit lower and stay close to the window. The more and more we move them towards the inner part of the room, we start to actually be using more of the natural light within the room, the natural illumination from a light bulb or whatever it would be, but we start to actually disguise that more. So you want to be turning that head towards the light source every single time if possible. When we sit the subject down onto the floor, though, this is like putting the softbox up too high. And if you put a softbox up too high, or any light source up too high, you'll find there'll be almost no catch light within the eye, or it'll be kind of above the 1 o'clock position, closer to the 12 o'clock. But more often than not, if it's too high, you won't see a catch light in the eye. And that's what we'd see here, is that we've lowered her too far down to the floor, with the catch light is not able to even bounce off the floor or bounce off a reflector to add a catch light within it. So what we've got is a very dull and muddy face, which is just a bit of a shame. But you know we can change it. If she looks towards the light source, we can get the quality back again, okay? So, you know, when I'm saying that this is a bad place to put a subject on the floor, very low down compared to the light position, i.e. the window, you can see here it works perfectly. But it's because we're fixing the problem. We acknowledge the problem. We know we're going to have an issue, so we need her to look off towards the light source more to get more quantity of light onto the face, a little bit more quality of the light as well. And of course, if I want to record this quality, what I need to do is move with my camera position towards the light source more to make use of that same position. If I stay where I am and I get her to look towards me, there is going to be no real quality of light within the face. And so we need to change it. And this image really typifies it. I've turned the body away from the light source. She's still being lit by that window. But because I haven't turned her head back towards the window, you can see now, even though we've got a little bit of a catch light, most of the light, if not all of the light, is coming from the likes of the light within the room or reflected off a wall. And you can tell that because we can see the catch lights within the eye. We can see reflections actually in the eye as well. And we can see the shadowing coming off the nose and the hair in the wrong direction. Remember, if our light is to our right-hand side, our light source, no matter what it is, we're expecting the shadow to be going to the left-hand side. If the light is coming in from the left-hand side, we're expecting the shadow to fall to the right-hand side. So if you're working with a light source and you're in too diffuse location and the light you're trying to make use of isn't kind of being used enough of, you're basically going to end up with shadows from the wrong direction because they're not being lit by that correct lighting. That's why I began with using the Natural Light 1 first, with the better quality of light. However, I see so many photographers on workshops and education things I've been involved with over my career, even training my own photographers, when they kind of, I've explained this like 3 or 4 times, why you're still using the wrong end. And it's just one day, I promise you, a light bulb, no pun intended here, will be switched on for you and you'll instantly go to the correct position of the lighting to maximize the quantity and the quality of the light. Now remember, rules are there to be broken no matter what. And you'll only learn a lot of these things by making mistakes. So the more photographs you take, the more mistakes you'll make, the more things that you will learn. I absolutely guarantee you as such. But when you start to actually work with window light, try and think about what you're actually trying to create and maximize within the portrait you're trying to take or within the image that you're trying to take, because they don't always have to look towards camera position. Let's not forget that.